Let's start. Good evening to you, and also I wish good evening to my listeners on YouTube, which is the first point I want to say here. This is being recorded. There is the camcorder, but it's directed from the window outside because of requirements on privacy of some of you. So, but we are still recording audio. The only reason why the camcorder is here is that I don't have any other device to record audio. This audio will be put on my YouTube channel. So don't say here anything what you don't want to be published. So, I am Urza. I am a libertarian author. I wrote a book about anarcho-capitalism and a lot of articles on this topic. I am also a member of Freedom to Learn, Svoboda učení. I'm one of the 5 core members. So I'm really glad that you came to our course. I also want to shortly introduce Rose. She's my soulmate, and she's also anarcho-capitalist, and she's here to help me a bit with English if I would need, because maybe I will. I'm sorry for my pronunciation and English, which is not so good, but I can do better. So, I want to ask you a question. Who of you is somehow familiar or, let's say, fan of self-directed education and unschooling? I suppose many of you, if you are here, or yeah, everybody. Great. Yeah, this is not so surprising here. I'm happy about that. And I have another question for you. This is something what not. If I may ask you if she will be yelling, if you can go with her a bit more far from my ear, or I don't want to be, you know, just rude. Thank you. I don't want to be rude. Yeah. Another question I have is something what not all of the unschoolers agreed on. And it's the role of government and state in the education. So, who of you think that the education and all the education system can be absolutely independent on state or government? And I mean by that really government will absolutely not interfere into education of people. So no schools, no laws about that, just nothing. Who of you would agree with this?
The government should have no role?
No role. Absolutely no role.
Yeah,
okay.
I believe that government should not force people to school. Although if schools work for some learners, they should be maintained for those learners.
Okay.
It should not be compulsory.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you want to attend that kind of school still you can, but not just by force.
You didn't raise your hand, so you think that the government should somehow interfere? You don't think?
Well, I didn't understand the question properly.
Okay, so if I get it right, all of you who are sitting here just don't agree with government anyhow involving to education system. Okay, that's great. So we can move.
Are you hesitant?
No, not like anyhow. I suppose that they put some rule in education, but you should have another choice. Because someone is familiar with schools, for someone it works, so why not? But if it doesn't work for you, you should have another option.
So,
like,
and the other
not
option...
to be forced to be compulsory for everyone.
And yes, like, and the other option shouldn't be regulated anyhow. Okay. Good. And now another question, if we agree also on this, can be maybe more interesting. Do you think that we need government at all for something, for any reason? So who thinks that the government and state are good for anything or necessary for anything? In general.
But do you mean tomorrow, or do you mean in 10 years?
I mean in general. I mean that
It could be
we all agreed.
It's the question: if you have the button, would you press it so it'll disappear tomorrow and put up with the
Not tomorrow, because I am not talking about the pro. Please, I want to ask you.
I think she's already taking
Okay.
her.
I forget what I wanted to say because
the red button disappears.
yeah, red button. Yeah, I don't want to discuss things like tomorrow the government would disappear, because this would probably lead to panics, chaos, and so on. I don't want to discuss, maybe later, yes, but I don't want to from the beginning discuss something like the transformation of how to make the government smaller, let's say. But I thought I am talking about the target state of the society. So we agreed that we don't need the government to somehow involve to education system. And my question is, do you think that there is something else which the government should somehow interfere? Or you agree that the government is just for nothing good and we should abandon it?
It's nothing good.
Yeah, I think it should be.
So who thinks that the government is just not necessary at all and the state is not necessary at all?
Yeah, I think it would take a couple of years to change over. But
There are caveats.
I agree idealistically. But if
Okay.
we talk about details, it becomes very complicated.
Yes, we're
Because
getting there. Question.
theoretically, the government could provide beautiful social programs for people that are retired, people that there are some good things that they could be focused
That they
on.
should be focused on.
Well,
But
again, we come from the United States, and so social programs are not really big in the United States, and I have an idealistic perspective of being taken care of. If I pay taxes, there's something that goes into it, but that's not a reciprocal situation, so no, as it stands, no, government doesn't represent us, government pays for war, so no. However, a voluntary structure that would ideally take care of people would be a lovely idea if we paid into it. If we didn't pay into it, which we don't, we've been out of the country for 10 years, then perhaps, so I see, like, from a personal perspective, no benefit, but idealistically, there could be an amazing
I think that
supportive of the arts, supportive
I
of.
think that would be a company and not government. If it's voluntary, then it's basically a company and not a
Or maybe
government.
charity, whatever.
Yeah, or maybe charity. Yeah.
I mean, whatever the system is.
Yeah.
Because when the state, the system is forced and you have to go through it, and it's
Now it is.
yeah.
But
well,
I do, like,
well,
again,
in
we've been out of
ideal
the country
state,
for
that
10
wouldn't
years.
happen. At the same time, when you have place where power can be used, there are always people who are going to come and take that power. I believe, because when you just have that position, it usually starts with somebody who is like, hey, let's do something good, let's do something for people, let's just be good here. But then you can change your mind, or somebody else can take the position, and that person doesn't have to have the
It's so
best
difficult,
ideas.
though, to create a blanket statement. For example, I'm part of the artist community, and I know people that have gotten artist grants, which are from the government. And to me, I feel like supporting the arts is a beautiful program. So I think just say no, government is bad, but I support the arts.
Well, if I understand it right, I am not sure what you are in fact saying, because first you said that the government theoretically no, and just voluntary structures, and now you are talking about artist support from government, and so
it's hard to sum up government
Although the
from
question
our
is-
experience into one small thing.
But I think the question then becomes, are these things impossible to attain without government?
Yes.
And can communities or groups of people come together and provide support for artists outside of government?
Sure,
And the answer to that is
but-
yes.
But he's talking about as it stands now, not an idealistic world. So as it stands now, there are little portions of government that I think are doing good, but bigger portions that are not doing good.
So you think that the government should be here, but different than it is now,
I
or
didn't say that.
I don't know.
Do you
I'm
want
asking.
me to speak about idealism? I could speak about idealism and utopia, and that would
No,
be a
no,
great. Okay, then if we're talking about status quo,
We are talking about something what can be here. Like, for example, here in Czech Republic, we had here some socialism before 1989. It was some different system, and then it changed. Back then, the status now was also quite idealistic, but it wasn't utopian, because it really happened. So this is what I am talking is not some utopia, but I'm talking about what should really happen and how it should be, not how the things are now. How you think the things should be?
so hard to speak about for us the Czech Republic's government and the history, because I don't have a full.
It's not about Czech government. It's in general. The question is, if we need a structure which is some central power point, which is telling people what to do and taking their money and giving them somewhere. Like, for example, to artists, but anywhere else.
Even being a part of an artist collective, we decide collectively to volunteer, to pay dues, to join the group,
Yes.
to create a government within that collective. So I don't think the idea of governance or organization is inherently wrong, but it's the ability to choose to be a part of governance and organization.
I think if
Those two
anything,
things are very different.
I think I should maybe.
Let's say government is an organization that is taking people's money and somehow organizing their lives without asking. You are just born in the state.
consent.
You have to pay taxes. You have to be a part of it.
I didn't consent to
Exactly.
that.
For
Exactly.
that you get some presents in the form of school and medication, but just like
We don't in the United
Basically,
yeah, but, you get something for it, but you don't get to choose it. Then for the other thing, to some governance or just some like cooperative thing where people get to choose what they want to do and they are doing it voluntarily and they are pouring their money into it, but because they want to, that's something completely different. And we are definitely not against that, because I believe that everybody and almost every person needs their own structure to function in, but they should be free to do so in their own will and to choose it.
And that's the key. Are you opting in? Are you giving consent? If you are giving consent and you're creating that organizational
yes,
or
exactly.
governance,
So
then
yes,
not opting into it.
Yeah,
But it-
I call it government when it's compulsory, when you have no choice. Like when I say government, I mean compulsory organization which you can't opt out of, and they can do laws for you without your consent. This is basically what I mean by government.
Maybe a good question would be if any one of you think that any laws should be in place. Do you think?
I don't think this question is so.
I think it's a good question because
Okay.
it's tied to all the different things that the government is managing. They basically do only laws. They don't do anything specific.
But I would say that we need laws, just not government laws. But
Okay.
so
Okay, laws that you
Agreed on.
that you don't opt in voluntarily. I would not say.
No. This is really.
I would not say laws.
Laws is really. It's really misleading.
Yeah, it is.
Really.
It's totally misleading.
Because the form of laws as we know it now is the law that is being forced on you by a government or by a place that you have been born into or moved into, and you cannot opt out of these.
Yeah.
Options that you make with people, on the other hand, are not like. You have to go with them, but like you are not. I don't know.
I understand the nature of your question, but it's so hard to create a blanket statement. That's
okay. I will.
But I do understand.
Later, I will say something to it, but I want to just listen the other people if they want to say something to that. You said that it's a great theoretical idea, but there is a lot of details. Or
just like what Paul was saying, if it were the red button, government disappears tomorrow. Like you were saying, it would not be a good situation. Just because as people are conditioned currently, it wouldn't go well. People have become dependent on government.
Yes.
If you remove that, idea of security, which is just an idea, but if you remove it, people lose their minds.
Yeah.
But not for that long. I don't think it would take that long.
Yeah.
I think eventually the
People
dust would settle, but it would be
disastrous.
It would be very violent. It would be disastrous, and it would be ugly. Sometimes, I mean, huge shifts in history have been that way, and maybe it has to be that way. Maybe it is necessary. But who are we to say? Before it happens,
because a lot of people will die.
Right.
I don't think that this is the good way, and I don't even think it's necessary, because I believe that we should try to make the governments and states smaller and smaller, even if now the trend is absolutely opposite, so they are getting just bigger. But I think that the point is to make them smaller and not to cancel them from one day to the other. Well, to cancel them from one day to the other is just not even possible, because I read the question with the button. You said it. It's like it's some question sometimes asked to libertarians, like if you would have some button here and you could press it, and it means that tomorrow there is no government. Would you press it or no? But I think that this question is quite misleading, because what does it actually mean? It means that I press the button, the government disappears, and there will be nothing instead of. It doesn't make sense. And mainly what would happen with the minds of that people? Like the people would still think exactly like now that they need big government, but it would disappear because of some button. The question doesn't have so much sense, because the people just want government now because they were raised like that. From the school they were absolutely indoctrinated that they need the government. They believe that. So I am quite sure that what we need to do is change this belief, and then the government can be lowered or made somehow smaller, and then maybe even just removed at all as the structure. But yes, this is good.
Libertarians are terrible at that process. Like they've been very unsuccessful at persuading anyone.
It depends on what party and where, I would say. Like there is a lot of
any country where the government's got smaller in the last 50 years.
It's true that it's not the best, but it also like depends on the country, because
for example, this country.
Well, this country's quite good. You had was it Havel, who was a fan of Hayek and stuff? Was it Havel? He was like an Austrian. He understood Austrian economics and stuff. But since then, it's just moved. The government's got bigger and bigger.
So much Austrian economics, was he?
Who?
Havel, wasn't he?
Havel, definitely. Havel.
Quoting Hayek when he got.
Havel. Are we talking about Hayek or Havel?
Havel. The prime minister, wasn't he?
He was president, not prime minister.
Yeah, he was president for quite a couple of years, and he was definitely never.
He was not Austrian economic. He was socialist as hell.
Yeah.
Total. Like people in the world knows him and somehow loves him because he was saying interesting stuff.
Well, he's portrayed in very well.
But he's portrayed well. In Czech Republic, we have him like such a...
All past leaders are portrayed well in their countries.
Yeah, but definitely he was total socialist.
Yeah.
He definitely didn't know anything about economy and especially the Austrian economy, and he was.
Or maybe it was the wrong guy that I'm thinking of.
He was really like.
You mean Klaus? Maybe.
Maybe
Klaus.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
He was prime minister.
That's who I.
Yeah, Klaus. Aha, okay. Well, Klaus maybe. Yeah, Klaus probably knows something about Austrian economy.
But since him, because he was before, wasn't he? Was he before?
No, he was after.
Was he after?
After what?
After Havel. Havel was in 90s.
They were
Havel
together.
was in 90s and then...
And Klaus as well. Havel was president and Klaus was prime minister.
Oh, he was. Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry. Because after that he became a president as well. So I get
my question
confused.
is, since then, has it moved more libertarian or more bigger government?
Like in last 50 years, as you said, we have now more freedom than 50 years ago. Because 50 years ago we were part of.
Since the end of communism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's shifting.
yeah.
So I imagine at the end of communism, it was like,
Yeah, so-
we can have some freedom, and then since
Yeah,
then,
so
it's been a slide.
exactly.
Kind of.
So yes, back then in communism, it absolutely sucked with freedom. Then here was such a change, maybe a revolution, but it was without violence.
Since people have had the chance to vote about it,
Exactly.
why people vote for bigger governments.
Yes, and then happened. It went to a lot of freedom, and then the freedom is again cut back.
Yes, go ahead.
So, but this is I am very sure that this is inherent attribute of democracy, that it's always heading to socialism, because the point of this is nice. That I finally I see somebody who doesn't agree, but I will tell you why, and you can tell me whatever. I am not a big fan of democracy in general. And the problem with democracy is that, let's say, you can start on quite free society. There is freedom of personal, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom even of business. So you have quite almost no regulation. And in such society, you start democracy. And sooner or later, there comes some politician who will tell you, I can protect you if you give me your vote. And some people sooner or later will give him the votes and he will do something for their protection. Whatever he fails or not, he definitely will protect some people. Usually he is protecting some people but harming others, but the harms are not so visible as the protection, so this is how it works. And mainly for this protection he needs to employ a lot of new people to the government. So by election of this politician we have here some more people who are depending on the state and who are depending on the state protection and also depending on the state money, because there is more state employers to execute that ideas. Well, but you have the democracy, and this is the problem, because after this happened, the ratio of people who are depending on state just went higher. So it means that there are more votes for politicians who are offering more protection. And this is the problem, because he gets those votes and he do the same. So there are more people depending on state. And this is such a spiral, which is one is leading to the other, and it's such an endless loop, because on the one hand there are rising numbers of people who are depending on the state, and because you have democracy, these people are voting to make the state more protective, which is again raising the numbers of people who want this, which means that democracy inherently leads to socialism, because you have the power to give people money or sources which are not theirs, which are of some other people, and as long as you give it to them, they can give you more votes. and this cycle could be broken just by some, I don't know. I don't like democracy, so I am not saying that this would be also some great way, but for example, if somebody is just taking money from the state, he shouldn't have the right to decide what to do with the money, and the people who are paying those money should decide. But I also don't like this system because it has just other ways how to corrupt it. So this is why I think that democracy is leading to socialism. What do you think about it? Do you agree or not?
Again, I can only speak from my perspective as an American, but at least back in our country, I would argue that it's the other way. Democracy kind of protects the status quo of capitalism in our country. So the protections that are given by politicians and by government are given to the rich and to corporation rather than people. And it's always been that trend for the past, well, really since the inception of the state. And so as a result of that, I feel like that kind of is moving away from socialism in a sense.
I think that, well, maybe it's more, I would say that corporativism is more close to socialism than capitalism, because, but whatever, the point is that maybe you know the history of your country better than me, but your country was very much free until there was a democracy, or not? You are saying that the democracy is protecting capitalism, but I think that your country was true capitalist country, and then in the beginning it was pure capitalism, and then the democracy came there. Then you started to vote about, for example, income taxes and stuff. If I remember it well, the first income tax was something like 0.3%, and there was a really big riot about this. Yeah. So, but probably you know it better. It's not my country, but I think that you are saying that the democracy is protecting the capitalism, but I think it's quite ruined it.
And I would like to say that actually in your country, right now there's no true capitalism, and there is actually a name for it, and it's called crony capitalism.
Yeah.
Corporativism.
Which is
corporativism, or one phrase that I really like is corporate fascism.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is. We do not have a
That's
democracy.
usually what government allows to.
I think you do have democracy. I think that this is the result of democracy.
Exactly.
People love democracy, and when this is really interesting. People love democracy. They are taught that democracy is just good, and when they see that the result is bad, they rather say it's not a democracy. But I think that it's natural result of democracy. I think that this, what is now happening in your country and even in my country, I think this is the democracy. This is where the democracy have to lead. I think it's absolutely logical, and all the Western democracies are showing the same result. And it's really interesting that at first there were people who were saying this even before it happened. Then we can see many countries where the same thing is happening. We can't see any country where it would be opposite. And still, people are tending to say this is not a democracy because it's bad. But I agree that it's bad. But I think it is democracy because democracy is bad.
The whole idea of democracy is representational democracy, and the country has gotten so far away from representation.
Really, all countries have. It's not a scalable concept.
It's not, and I think
which is why it fails.
from a governance perspective, you need to separate the economy, the economic perspective, just for a moment, and look at how the two systems are supporting each other or running side by side. I don't think it's a representational democracy, and the economy is based on capitalism, which is crony capitalism. Yeah.
I want to disagree that democracy is bad. I think that there's like an idealistic idea of democracy, of society organization. But what is bad in democracy? That it's applied through the state.
Well, of course.
Because state is the bad thing in democracy.
Yes,
because we know a lot of like examples of democracy if it's like the principle. Because if it's voluntary, for example, democratic schools, it's like a voluntary society which is organized by democratic principle.
I don't know.
It's not bad in like.
Yeah, absolutely agree, but I don't know how the word is exactly used.
It's bad. I want to add. It's forcing the power. How the democracy is forced in the society.
I agree. I just
forcing the people against.
I absolutely know what you are saying, and I agree. I'm not sure what how the word democracy is exactly used in English, but in Czech, if you say demokracie, it doesn't mean when we would vote here. It means the word in Czech, the democracy word in Czech includes whole the society. The social system of organization. So I don't know if we would here, for example, vote for something, what we will do. I don't know if in English it would be called democracy, but in Czech it wouldn't be called demokracie.
It would be called a democratic process.
Okay.
You tapped right onto the solution in the beginning where you said governments are too big. I think you're right. You could bring democratic systems in, but they don't work with such a massive scale. They only work on community levels.
On a larger, once you reach a larger scale, governments require state violence in order to enforce democracy.
I think
mainly
I would,
and it's also really unprecise when it comes to economics, because the larger scale of people you are trying to take care of, the less you can.
So it's the problem of centralization.
Well,
it would be like in decentralized society. It doesn't matter if it's a small society, if it's anarchistic, democratic, or anything else, because it means it's the problem of the centralization.
I somehow agree, but I would like to a bit specify it, because I don't think the point is in a scale, but I think the point is in if it's voluntarily or not. Because there can be functional democratic processes which are really big. For example, you can see it on Bitcoin network. There are even some like democratic processes on big scale, and it's working. And or Wikipedia or whatever. Like you can see democratic processing working on really large scales. But the point is that when they are working, they are always voluntary, and they are not forced. So I think it's working as long as it's not forced, and as it is forced, it can fail even on a really small group. For example, if we would have democracy here in this group, as we are here in this room, and we would have to vote about, for example, our monies or our free time or our laws, I don't think it would work, and we are a very small group.
And I think that it works. It means that it's serving the people well. That the people are fine with how's it going. So democracy cannot work unless it's voluntary. Because if someone is involuntarily forced to abide by a democratic party of some sort, then he will not be comfortable with that. He will not be fine. It will not work for him. So yeah, I would say that it means that it works.
I just think if we're talking about geographical locations, let's say the state controls an area. People live in that area. They're governing over the people within that area. Once you reach a large enough scale, it becomes impossible to guarantee the consent of everybody within that area. And that is why government requires state violence to enforce democracy, to enforce socialism, to enforce fascism. It's a matter of scale rather than system, in my opinion.
It's, if you want to rule over the people in general, yes, but you can have democratic process which is not involving whole lives, and it can even involve a lot of people. So you can have really large groups, usually some online groups. Those groups can have democratic system inside, and then they can be working. They can use democratic processes and then can be really big. And this just works. And it means by me that it's not about scaling, but it's about if it's voluntary or not.
I agree with that. I think it is incentive-based. People participate because they want to. There's an incentive for them to do so,
yes.
especially with Bitcoin. But it's becomes a different conversation when we're talking about the physical world where people have to live their day-to-day lives. When there is control over a location where somebody has lived, that is where it becomes a very complex situation.
Well, I think that it's just not necessary. I mean, I don't think that there is a need for some groups of people to have some leaders who are deciding everything of their lives. Some aspects, yes. So you can delegate some aspects of your life to somebody to decide about them, and it's absolutely not bad, and everybody is doing it. But I think that as a people are different, everybody has different needs, which rights and aspects of his life he wants to delegate to somebody else, and which aspects he wants to keep for himself. For example, let's say basic protection of your property or health or so on against some violence. There's a lot of people who more trust to the government, and it doesn't have to be government. It could be also, if there wouldn't be government, it could be also some company or whatever. And they just delegate this aspect of their life to somebody else. But there are other people who says, no, I want to protect myself, and they, for example, have guns, and they are relying on themselves because they want to have this in their hand. You have the same with education, the same with health, the same with everything. And the point is that everybody is quite different, so every person wants some other aspects of his life in his hand, and everybody is willing to give some of them away. But the problem of the government is that on that local territory, all the people have to give up the same rights and responsibilities and aspects of their life to put them to the central authority, to delegate it to the central authority. And this is the problem, because this is making the people quite being enemies to each other. Because basically, in democracy, and when I'm saying democracy, Michal is right, I mean the state system, the government system, the democracy in whole the society, which is compulsory. In this system, people who have very different opinions than you are your enemies, potential enemies, because through this system they can force you to live by their rules and not by yours. In free society, and free society for me doesn't mean democratic society, but really free society. In such society, you quite don't need to care how somebody else who is living in town 100 kilometers from you, how he is educating his kids, how he have his house saved from thieves, and all these things you just don't care, because you can have your kids in your education system, he can even beat his kids, and you can have, I don't know, some company who's protecting you and he can have weapons or whatever. And you just don't have to care about that because it's not your business. But in democracy, this is a problem. And that's also why we can see, mainly on the internet, but also face by face, how people are hating other people for different opinions. And I think that this hatred is just product of democracy. Because now if I see a person who says the schools have to be more brutal and there should be less freedom for the people. When he's saying this in the public space, it's threat for my kids. But in free society, I wouldn't need to care of what he thinks, because he can put his kids to such a school and I can put my kids to some other school or leave them at home.
Or to no school.
Or to no school, leave them at home. So this is...
I respectfully disagree, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. I disagree with the blame. I actually don't think democracy is the problem. I think the economic system is the problem. I think a system of greed and a system of not having or less than. I think wealth and power, that's the system that we should be looking at.
Can you
specify that?
Specify it.
When there's disparity in wealth, then if somebody is fighting to get theirs and they believe somebody else has something that they should have, that's the divisiveness.
The disparities in wealth, they come from the government programs. So it's not, like for example, patents. Any company, that's why all the big tech companies are big tech companies, because they have the government protecting what no one else can do the
I
same
would
and improve
blame
it.
the government in
But I still-
with
if you look
the
into-
economic
if you look-
system.
Yeah, but if you look in, but that's not the capitalism. That's the government intervention. And if you look at how the wealth gap grew, that was since the government went off the gold standard in about the 70s. Yeah, and the big giant gaps started then.
But it's not an individual government. We're talking about the World Bank. We're talking about.
And it's all the same thing.
economic
It's all the same thing, like
systems.
patents worldwide.
Sure.
I would...
And all the regulations and stuff that stop other people competing. All the regulations are like, I can't think of any, plastic bags or something. This is always for the big companies, so they can keep theirs, and the government just does their bidding for them and makes the laws in their favour. But that's because you have the
I just want to
system.
ask you more about this, because now the discussion went somehow more far, and I still don't fully understand what you were saying. Like, what do you mean by the greed system, by the having and not have, by the wealth?
Well, you're saying that the issue is democracy.
One of them, the compulsory democracy. Yes.
I'm saying that the issue is really the economic system as a whole. And,
Okay.
and that includes capitalism and socialism and communism and all the isms.
And what is
combined,
wrong
but
on it, and how it, like, what's wrong on it? Like,
I think it's the economic system itself that's creating the divisiveness, that's creating less of a cooperative, voluntary,
how it should be.
The alternative is communism, socialism.
I believe that's what you are saying.
I'm not sure what.
No. You're saying that that's the only alternative. I'm saying, I'm not even looking at that. I'm talking about currency. I'm talking about the economic system itself.
In the
I
first
feel-
place, I would say
I still don't understand. I
the two. You can't divide the economics and the governments and the state.
I was going to
Because,
say that too.
because the state controls basically what happens.
May I ask you, before you will have the discussion and arguing, I still want to understand. I still don't get the point. I still don't get what do you mean by that the problem is the economic system. What do you mean by economic system? Economic system is also that you came here and you pay us for being here. This is also part of economic. Like,
Yeah, I
what's
understand.
so? Like, my
Based
question is,
on-
what's wrong on the economic system? Like, what
Well, based on currency, we all have to earn currency in order to pay our way.
like money in general?
Currency, money, yes.
So you think that the money is the problem?
I think the system itself is the problem, not the governments. Well, I think the governments contribute to it, but I think we should look at the economic
What
system.
do you mean by the economic system? You mean money?
Yes,
Okay.
currency.
I will.
What do you mean? Because it's bad money generally, or because just the idea of money in
No,
general?
no. I'm just saying we require money in order to live, right? A human being requires money in order
It
to
just
live.
simplifies.
We're not in a free world. We don't have a free. This is not free. nothing is
because-
free in
because-
life.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
from a big concept.
Yeah,
Right.
because
So we have to
you have
pay-
unlimited wants and limited
Because there are
resources.
limited resources in the world, so nothing is
Then you're
free.
saying resources need to be purchased by
That's
currency,
true.
by
Yeah.
money.
Well,
But the
let's
currency
say
is
all resources need to be purchased by something. If you want
But
somebody's
that's the
good,
problem of the system.
no, that's
No,
the
that's
problem
the-
of the life because that's how
It's
it
the
is.
problem
If
of
you
the
want-
universe.
If you want somebody's time, you need to pay for it somehow by doing something for them, by spending time with them, by giving them something, or in a simplified way, giving them money. Sometimes you cannot use, a lot of times, you cannot use barter to somehow get your way in the market. Maybe you want to buy bread, but you only have this kind of soda that you can exchange, and nobody wants your kind of soda. Then money comes really in hand because it simplifies the exchange, and money is basically invention of people who kind of like
Bingo.
Wanted to
Yeah.
trade.
wanted to trade. And if you want to trade and you want to do it successfully, then money is really like handy way how to achieve it.
But the issue has become it's not about changing, converting your energy, your labor into money anymore. It's about the accumulation of money or currency,
That
right?
very much comes to a person, I would
to
say.
create wealth. And wealth
That's
then
a personal issue. Somebody does that, somebody doesn't.
I agree, but it totally gets rid of the ability to barter, to go back to.
But if you won't have money, the
Unequal
people.
currency,
If you
that's
imagine,
what creates
if you imagine that you won't have
disparity.
money, anyway, the people will do the same, and they will gather resources, time of people, and stuff. So, by removing money, you just remove the best way of making trades.
Just made it hard.
But you make it harder, but still, you won't change the people. The people who are now collecting and gathering money will be collecting and gathering times, resources, and so on. So what will be?
But what I'm saying is, let's look at the economic system itself and how that is functioning and question that instead of the governments.
You are all the time repeating the same sentence, and I am asking you, what do you mean by that? You said money, and now we are talking about money, and then you are still repeating the sentence, look at the economic system. And I am asking you, what do you mean? What should I look at? When I'm looking at economic system, I see you come to this building and paid us money for that. Is this bad?
I didn't say it was bad. I'm saying that the issues are within the system itself and how we function as humans with money and how we can accumulate wealth. It creates disparity of wealth.
Is this a problem of
So what
life?
would should?
Yeah.
So you are saying that we
I
should?
don't know what the
Yeah.
solution is. I'm saying the questions should be asked about the system that we're
But
using. Because there's
how can we
problems with
ask
the
questions
system.
about something which you can't even specify? You are all the time saying ask economic system, but when I'm asking you what should I ask,
I'm saying that's where we should dig in deeper to look for those
what?
questions. Look for the system itself is not working.
what do you mean by system?
The system of currency.
What
Who
do you
has
mean by
the-
that?
But in what way, let's say then? And how is it not working? Because I do not
There's a
understand.
disparity of wealth.
Yeah,
Some,
That is...
I think it's not a problem of money. It's a problem of the people's needs. Because if there weren't money, they would exchange something else, and they would accumulate something else. It's not a problem of the currency, I see, but it's a problem of people wanting more than they have, and I think that's prevalent amongst all the people throughout the history. I think that's just our nature, and we have to deal with it somehow. But I'm not sure it's the system is used in a way that people want it to use. But it's not a problem of the system; it's a problem of the people because they need to.
I don't think it's a problem.
I don't think it's
If
a
people
problem.
didn't want
Yeah,
more
and-
than they
and-
had.
yeah,
then-
you can use it in a
then-
nice way.
Then
Yeah.
the caveman would just wake up in the morning and go, "Oh, I'll just,
You do have
I'll just
some-
eat the mud then. Can't be bothered for hunting. You know, I don't want anything more." And then that would be the end of the world.
But I do want to say to that, it is a different system though, because back then, for example, you could hoard what? You could hoard roots, you could hoard fruit, you could hoard your meat.
Yeah, but you could,
and it would only last until it's spoiled or it didn't have any purpose anymore.
But you could say you could hang up some meat and dry it, and then another gang came past, and they're all a bit hungry and they've had a bad day. Then they'll say, "Oh, can you give us some of your meat, and we'll give you some of our tools." There's nothing wrong with that.
You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say to address the money and currency. I would like to say that there is a big difference between money and currency. And currency is not money, because money should be something that is tangible, that has value,
it's backed by
and holds value over time. It's portable, it's divisible, and currency has all these things except protecting the value over the time, because governments can bring the currency, inflate it, and we have seen it in many countries over the world. Inflating the currency is
State money are bad, and there are some reasons.
To address the disparity, I think it's caused by various government programs and the support of crony capitalism, where the top 1% or top 0.1% gets all the wealth in the world with the help of government, and that's basically it. They collect from the poor and give it to the wealthiest. That's what's the government or the state as we have it now allows.
What I wanted to ask you was, I want to understand your stance more on currency and on money. Because if you are in favor of basically, making government smaller and reducing it, what is your stance on money, and who is or what is money going to be backed by, if not by a government, if not by some finite currency, and who is going to enforce that?
The short answer is that the money were originally not protected by government. Well, protected, I mean destroyed. Originally, the money had the value, for example, by some rare metals or so on. So there was golden standard for a long time. There were even other monies before. There were also, even back then, before that, there was some shells or some rare stones and so on. So there was a lot of ways how to conserve the value, and this all was real money. And now
paper money started as a voucher for
yes,
gold in
yes, exactly. So and even now you have also cryptocurrencies, which are, a lot of them are protected mathematically from inflation, so nobody can create new ones. And so this is the short answer on that. The government is not needed for this. Like for golden standard or Bitcoin or many other currencies, you don't need government. And of course, it doesn't mean go back to the medieval ways. It means you can have your bank account in gold and not in Czech crowns or dollars or whatever. But my status to money is like, I think that the money is one of the greatest inventions ever, because we already mentioned here, I think you mentioned it, the one function of it, that it's the better trading. Like instead of barter, you can use money. And this is what everybody says when you ask, why do we have money? This is important function of money, but it's not their basic and crucial function, which is in prices. The prices are absolutely great system how people can communicate with each other all over the world without knowing each other, and also, this is something like very old internet, but even better, because you are not just transferring the information, you are also transferring the motivation. I will get some example. For example, you can have, here in Czech Republic we found some new big mines, not mines, there are not mines yet, but there is some lithium under the ground. Now it's very strategic resource because you can do batteries of lithium. And imagine that people all around the globe doesn't need to know where new lithium was found, if in Czech Republic or somewhere else. They just can see the price of the lithium, and this is signalizing them if this research, how scarce is this resource, if we have a lot of it or not. And the problem with scarcity is absolutely greatly solved by prices, which means, for example, you will have here some big lithium mines, and you will put lithium all around the world, and the people will make batteries of it, and there would be a lot of machines using the batteries and so on. And then, after many years, the mine went over and the lithium is now out and we don't have any other. And what happens? The price of the lithium will grow higher, and the people will have to search for new solution how to power their machines, or how to create batteries of something else than lithium, or whatever else. And the great thing is that the people doesn't need to know that here is some lithium mine and that there are some problems and that the lithium is out. They don't even to know where the lithium is coming from. They just see that the price is rising. And they are motivated, because of greed, by the way, they are motivated to find better solution. So the greed, which is so much criticized, is also the way how to make people to find effective solutions of problems. And this is absolutely connected with the price system and with the money. And the point is, I was showing it at lithium, for example, but you can use it quite on everything, because even human being is research in some way. For example, I am a programmer, I'm also anarcho-capitalist author, I'm member of Freedom to Learn, and I have a lot of, I am also a teacher. And when I should decide what I want to do, I don't know what is how much good for the society. I can think something, but without the prices, I don't have any feedback of the people around me. And if I see that the people they pay me so much for programming, so much for teaching, so much for, I don't know, making anarcho-capitalist talks or write articles, I can see what the society requires the most of me, and then I can decide by myself what I want to do. I didn't pick up the most valued job because I like to do something else, but it doesn't matter. The point is that I have the signal of the society about how can I be used as the valuable resource. And this is something which is really important, and it's a really important function of money, which is absolutely overlooked by people. Like they ignore this. And I think that there is no other way but money how we can reach this spread decentralized information about the world. I think that I'm quite sure that with current level of technology, and I very much think that even with much higher level of technology, we still don't have any other way how to somehow use something else than money to share this information about scarcity all around the world. So.
I would like also to maybe step back to Lainey's question about the economic system and about the problem of accumulating the capital and also big companies. And I would like to say that I think you said that the political system is not so important, but the economic system, I really my belief is that it couldn't be divided. It's like this, the economic system is another part of the same coin of the political system. And I would, because I'm agree with you in some way about accumulating of the capital or big companies are in some way the problem. And I would like to explain maybe in other way or some examples. What I think is bad that we can see in the economical system that the biggest companies who are accumulating the system or using, for example, speculative business or something like that, they are mostly protected by the government. The biggest company are receiving more benefits from the government than the poor people. So in the big picture, it looks like the government is for the poor people or for the people under or in the bottom of the social structure. But in I think in the statrix, it's like that the biggest company are the big have the biggest benefits from the governmental protection
and impact on it.
And I think that in the result, every time the company is like it's really idealistic, because every time it's idealistic. It's like we would help these people, we would help these people, we would help these people. But if we see the economical statistics, every time it's like the government is in the result. There are some ideas to help the poor people, but in the result, every time it's like the poor people are in a worse situation with government than without.
Definitely.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and it's also connected with the accumulating capital and speculative business, because it's always connected with the government protection. For example, mortgages, it's usually covered in some way by government or something like that. We could see every time in the statrix that the biggest company are mostly connected with the government. And I think this is like the inherent or inherent vastnost
to the state, like
property.
Yeah. It's always like this. And also we could see in the economical statistics that there are like there were like authoritarian states in the previous history, and they are now more like bringing more economic freedom. For example, China is a little bit controversial, but also African, some states and stuff like that. And when in the history, when there is more economical freedom, the poor people are always better, because it means like the whole society is going better in the economical way, and the poor people, maybe there could be some like some economical differences between the people, but the whole society is growing up in the economical level. So it means in the result, if you have more economic freedom and less government protection, it's always better for the poor people.
I understand that, but I would just say as a consideration, given the example that you gave about the lithium, we're not considering as a system the triple bottom line, and that means the health of the planet. What does it mean to mine lithium from the planet from an ecological perspective? That's not considered. What does it mean to the health of the people that live in that environment?
But that's only
not considered. I mean, we're just using this example. And by using the example of greed as a motivator to create more profit, it totally disregards the human factor that I think is super important, that I feel that the economic system currently does not support.
But you are saying that the greed is. You just said that the greed is.
Answer, but I'm saying those are things that we need to look at.
But
as human beings.
But the point is that the greed is like. You said that it's used to create profit. That's true. But creating profit means also create something for the people. Because creating profit on the free market means satisfy needs of people. Because you can't create profit out of nothing.
Satisfying the needs of the market driven by people.
But market is people. Market is people.
I understand that. But market then becomes an entity of itself. And the voices of those that are concerned about the triple bottom line are not heard. And that's all I'm saying. Let's consider the system is not foolproof.
Can I just add something about the environmental thing? When it was the Industrial Revolution in the UK, when the factories started pumping out all their muck, the people living around were suing the factories for making their laundry dirty and stuff and winning until the government stepped in to protect the factories, and then that changed it. You know, so if you just go back to property rights, you know, then all these environmental problems get solved because a company can't afford to pay out all the people that they're damaging.
And again,
without the government blocking the way.
Our government. I'm just saying, let's look at it.
Yeah, you're right. I think as we spoke yesterday, or you had the presentation about ethical travel, right? And it's about the one's responsibility. You should decide with your dollar what you will pay. Whether you will support the unethical, unecological factory or whatever it is, business in general, or the ethical and ecological one. And since most of the people now think that they should be provided by government, like government should think about the ecology and everything, they are getting rid of their responsibility. And that's the current situation, basically. That's why nobody is thinking about it, because they got rid of their responsibility. But I agree with you, we have to think about it, and everyone should get back their personal responsibilities in their choices.
Definitely.
Not to rely on someone else to tell them what to do. And that's basically
Before we
I think, in some way agree with you. Also, I think that the state and the government is the best way for the most greedy people to control the others. For example, we can see, I can add an example with the jungle forest in Amazonia, because the government stole the land to the original people of the Indians, and it disrupt their owners owning of the land, and now the originally Indian people from the forest, they are now using the concept of owning to judge with the government that it's their land.
Yeah, we know.
And it's every time like this. It's like big companies and capitalism is wrong, but the government stole the land to the original people. It was their land. And I think for me this is the core idea of the, how to say, free market. You are owning your own things, and you have the right to what to do with itself. You can sell it, or you can keep it for you or for others.
To bring the example of the Amazon into this, the Amazon, the people that live in the Amazon, they were basically acquired by, say, the Peruvian government. And they were told that they had to use an economic system that was provided by the government. So I'm not arguing for it, by the way. I'm just saying this is what happened. And now they're told that they have to use this form of currency, an economic system that is foreign to them, to purchase food, to purchase water, to pay credits for their school and be schooled in such a way. So to have a system forced upon them when they were accustomed to gathering food, to getting their own water and filtering it the way that they want.
But again,
system itself was,
you are getting to that the problem is that they were forced to do something. But the problem is not the economy and the money, but the problem is the force, and it's the government again. It's not. No. It's absolutely not a problem for us to go to shop and pay for food. I don't see any problem in it. But it is a problem for somebody who was forced to this. So it means you have it means that then you have just on both sides you have the economical system, and once it's okay, once it's not. And the difference is that once it's compulsory and once it's voluntary. So it's just the problem is not the economy, the problem it's the government to force the people to do something what they don't want to do.
I agree with
and,
you, but I'd say let's look at both systems.
I want to say, isn't everybody coerced to use money in a sense?
Isn't everybody
coerced to use money?
No.
You can outline and fire your argument.
You theoretically,
I'm just asking.
Probably yes by some governments, but like you are not directly forced. But for example, if you have shop, you have to accept the national currency there. For example, in Czech Republic, I don't know how it's in America, but here in Czech Republic, if you have a shop, you have to just accept Czech crowns. You can also accept another currencies, but you have to accept this one. And there are such a laws. You have to pay taxes in the currency and so on. If you have, also if you have some land, you have to pay tax from it, and the tax is so yes, people are forced to use money, but people are forced by governments to use money. So, yes.
I would say they are forced to a certain form of money.
Yes, exactly.
Because they force you to use the national currency and don't give you an option, or you cannot basically decide by yourself what kind of money, what sort of money you will take.
Before we somehow end this discussion, I would like to tell you something about did you hear term anarcho-capitalism? Yes. I think that this I don't know how to call it in English.
Ideology?
This ideology maybe. What?
Movement.
Movement, okay. It has such two pillars, the personal freedom and the economical freedom. I think that we very much agree on that personal freedoms here, and I think we all quite feel the same about that. So this is not so much topic here because we are all agreeing probably. And about the economical point, I want to recommend you to read something about Austrian economy, because, for example, for me this was absolutely eye-opening, because I was thinking that the personal freedom and the economical freedom can be dividable, and that the one can exist without the other. Now I'm quite sure that it's not possible, and the Austrian economy taught me how mainly the function of the money, the subjective theory of value, like we are valuing things. It's really interesting because, for example, for all the medieval and even before, all the thinkers tried to find out how people are valuing things, and the Austrian economy find an answer to this. And I think that people who are agreeing with the personal freedom, but they don't have so much, they have a lot of questions about the economical freedom. I would really recommend the authors of Austrian economy, for example, Ludwig von Mises, mainly, but also, for example, Marie Newton Rothbard. And you don't need to agree with anything there, but for me it was incredibly much eye-opening. And they are giving me answers to questions which I never asked, but then I find out that the questions are very important. And I think that mainly the function of money as a way of communication among the people is, I think, one of the biggest contribution of Austrian economy to the economic thinking itself. But you can also read there about how why the government is always less effective than when it's done voluntary and so on. So this is something what I want to recommend you. And if like you don't talk Czech, so I won't give you any links to my pages because I am writing in Czech. But for example, I can recommend Jeffrey Tucker. I don't know if you know him. So he's, for example, a very great author of these thoughts. And I also.
And also a nice person.
Yeah, he's also a nice person. He's. I was talking with him like 2 years ago. He's really nice. I like him. And also, I can recommend you another author I like, and it's Walter Block. Yeah, he's not so much known, and I would recommend him to people who are considering themselves as logical more than emotional. Because if you are emotional, he is just pissing you off and nothing else. If you are,
what's his book about? Something like the 20 things that shouldn't be banned. Or something.
Yeah, he's very much provocative, but it's very good. You can take it as a, let's say, a logical exercise, even if sometimes pissing for most of people. But I really appreciate his work. So, I want to ask you if somebody has some question on me before we go, and Michal want to say something. Yes. So first add something.
Yeah, and also I'm not sure if it's in English, but there is a very good new book from Juraj Karpiš, Good and Bad Money. And I think it's very good analysis that like money is not bad in general, but what is bad on state money. It's very good analysis, like the reasons why the state money are bad. Very good analysis, and also I think this is very nice book about personal freedom from Tom G. Palmer. It's from the Atlas Foundation, and it's also a very good book, and we have it here in English.
I believe that the book from Juraj is not in English.
It's not in English.
But my book is being translated. So, I want to ask you, do you have some questions for the end? For example, do you want to ask me something or whatever?
I wanted to add, if you would like to dig more into this money and currency and the economic system problem, there is a very nice series on YouTube from Mike Maloney. It's called Hidden Secrets of Money. It has 10 episodes, and he's one of the best living historians of money in this economic system. And it goes really from like no money, barter, until the Bitcoin.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if you it's easily digestible, and if you maybe like to see the videos or prefer to see the videos, it's really a good way how to see why the current system is screwed.
So, you want to add something more?
Yeah, just last sentence. I think, and we missed this because it's always like more because I think in most of the debates and discussion like this, there is something hidden on the personal or intrapersonal level. Because in my focus of psychoanalysis and psychotherapist, and one video opened my eyes in this, that in some way people always thinking about the state and self-control and stuff like that. I think there's a hidden level of fear, because people always think about the government that it's some maybe
Say
a little bit simplified,
Yeah.
that they have like the big fear in them, and they are thinking that somebody would protect them, and they are giving their power to another people, government, it doesn't matter how to call it. And for me it was the most improving thing to realize that there is some fear which push me to give my control of my life to other people. And I think it's not useful just to think about these topics in a rational way. We have to go in some time with some people to go deeper in this emotional and interpersonal level, because rational level is for nothing, or for maybe most people, because there is hidden fear, and in the end it's the fear of death. It's the most basic thing in the most strong motivation to give the power to other people or to government or anybody else. Because firstly we have to see the most deepest fear in ourselves to see it clear. We have to face our deepest fear, to think really clear, in a really clear way, without any
pseudo motivations,
side motivations. Because this is I think, in my point of view, the biggest motivation to give the power is the fear of death.
And the ugliest thing about this is that governments are exploiting this.
Oh yeah.
Actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because we are living in a culture of fear, and we can see it everywhere.
Also, the longer the state and governmental power is continued, the more people are becoming dependent on it, and the more they are going to depend it more and more. So you start
and
with
the fear is growing.
Exactly, you start with something, and then you see how it's just growing and growing, and then you of course give it to your children, and they will give it to their children, because you just know it and you are brought in it. It's everything you've ever known.
Yeah.
So you basically cannot pass on something else if you have never felt anything else than that.
Yeah.
So agreed with you.
I totally agree.
And also just one maybe recommendation. I think it couldn't be not only about Austrian economics or this etc., but also good for me philosophical book is Nicholas Taleb, Anti-Fragility. It's about how to face your fear, because we are living in the centralized society it's fragile, and if you want to go to decentralized society, you have to let go your fears, because the decentralization is always a little bit chaotic, and you have to
be way more responsible.
Fears are limiting you.
So,
very much.
Some more questions or additions of
I was just going to say, I can't get online. There's a book that I would have recommended, but I can't remember the name. It's Charles Eisenstein, and he wrote about, it's something economies, and I can't think of the name. And that's the thing that I was just Charles Eisenstein, which is a brilliant read.
Do you have data if you want to subscribe?
And he has
Charles, do you know what I'm talking about?
on YouTube, he has a video of deschooling yourself.
Yes.
And he's doing some workshop how to deschool yourself. How to deconstruct your own constructs in your mind about
sacred economics.
That's it. That's it. And to me, that resonates very, very deeply with me, the sacred economics. I see the value of capitalism, but coming from a very highly capitalistic country, I've seen it really destroy people. I've got to find the balance, and I just have to keep asking those questions. Where's the value? Where's the value? What are we not looking at? What are we missing? And so thank you for allowing me to even ask those questions here. I know that's not part of what you normally talk about. He cracked a smile for me.
You got him.
You cracked him open.
Okay.
Here we go.
So thank you for coming and discussing. It was really nice and pleasant. So
You're not saying it like it was pleasant, but he's sick, so.
what?
That you are saying it like it's been so pleasant. But he's been really sick the last 3 days, and I've been making tea non-stop, so.
And thank you for coming here to Svobodum, and I hope you will come again. So, bye bye. Thank you.